Before we start factoring, let's do our puzzle practice. Take a minute and solve the puzzles at the top of the page. Push pause while you do that. Once you're ready to check your answers against my work, push play. Take a moment to check your answers against mine, and then we'll start factoring. Today we have a bit of a twist. As we look at some of these problems, we can see at first glance that there's actually a step we need to add to the beginning of our process. Notice 2x squared and negative 8. They're both divisible by 2. If we can take a GCF out of all the terms in a problem, we want to do that before we start. So let's factor out a 2. I'm going to use a big bracket because this is going to kind of separate this step from all the other work that we do. So we can see that we've got this extra bit that's just going to hang on the outside of the problem while we do our normal work. So inside, if I think of 2x squared divided by 2, I'm left with x squared. And if I think of negative 8 divided by 2, I'm left with 4. Now, this is a special problem even further than that because notice it's a binomial instead of the normal trinomial. So my next step is going to be to add that x squared, that 0x, in the middle. So I have x squared plus 0x minus 4. All right, so now we're ready to solve the puzzle. What multiplies to make negative 4 and adds to make 0? Well, that would be 2 and negative 2. So it's time to split the middle term. So I still have the 2 in the big bracket, but I'm splitting this into x squared plus 2x minus 2x minus 4. And I can go ahead and make the sum of two binomials. It's time to look for greatest common factors. So if we're asking ourselves, what is the greatest common factor of x squared and 2x? Well, they both contain an x, and I would have to multiply x by x and x by 2 to get back to the original problem. So I have the 2 in the big bracket, but now I've factored out this x that they have in common, and I'm leaving x plus 2 in the parentheses. Then I look at negative 2x and negative 4. Well, they're both divisible by a negative 2. I would multiply negative 2 by x and then by positive 2 to get back to the original problems. So I factor out a negative 2, leaving an x and a positive 2 in the binomial. All right, we're ready for our last step. Let's factor out the x plus 2 that they have in common. But let's not forget the 2 that was already out here in front of the whole problem all along. Left inside the parentheses is an x minus 2, and you have factored as far as you can. Now let's look at that next problem and see, does this also have a greatest common factor of all three terms that we should take out before we do any other work in the problem? And I think you'll see that we do. Notice each of those terms is even. Since each of them is even, that means we can divide a 2 out of everything. That will leave us with x squared plus 6x and minus 7. It's time to solve the puzzles. I want to know what multiplies to make negative 7 and add to make 6. Let's see. I've got, a positive 7 and a negative 1 would multiply to make a negative 7, and they do add to make a positive 6. So I have 2 in the big bracket. We're now going to split that positive 6x up into a positive 7x and a negative x. So I have x squared plus 7x minus x minus 7. The 2 in the big bracket stay, but we need to make this a sum of binomials and look for the GCFs to put in these big brackets. So if I look at x squared and 7x, well, they both contain an x. I would need to multiply by x, and down here I would need to multiply by 7. So I'm going to factor out the x and leave x plus 7. Then I look at negative x and negative 7. They both can be divided by a negative 1. On the top I would need to multiply by x, and on the bottom I would need to multiply by 7. So let's factor out a negative 1 and leave an x plus 7 behind. All right, that's the last time I need to write those big brackets. I have the 2 that I factored out in the beginning. I have the x plus 7 that they have in common, and I have the x minus 1 that they leave behind. That's my final answer. Let's summarize our steps before I ask you to try one on your own. So if we think about what we did here, we're adding a step to the beginning of our problems. So we're going to say, if possible, factor out a GCF. That means factor out a GCF from everything. So sometimes this first step is possible in a problem, and sometimes it's not. Step 2 is to solve the puzzle. So we look at the AC, we say what multiplies to make AC and what adds to make B. We solve that puzzle so that we can get to step 3, which is to split the middle term. Step 4 is to factor out the GCF. Step 4 is to create the sum of the two binomials. Step 5 is to factor out the GCF from each binomial. And then step 6 is going to be to factor out the common binomial. Those are the steps we followed in the problem we just did. All right. I am not going to solve this problem. This problem is your homework for tonight. Keep going for right now or push pause, your choice. You could push pause, solve this problem, and then push play when you're ready for my help with the problems at the bottom of the page. Or you can go on right now to the problems at the bottom of the page and just make sure to come back and solve this one afterwards. I'm going to take a look at function notation with you down below as soon as you're ready. So down here we're doing a review. We did some of these function notation problems either in period 2 or period 3 pretty recently. In the other class it's been a little while, so I want to refresh your memory. So when we do function notation, we're often asked, evaluate each function for the given variable. So basically we have a function. In the first problem it's f of x is x minus 4 times x plus 6, and we're asked to evaluate this for f of negative 3. Well, notice that they've put a negative 3, I'm trying to go to highlighter, sorry, where the x should be. So that means that everywhere I see an x, I should be replacing it with negative 3. So I'm going to say f of negative 3 equals negative 3 minus 4 times negative 3 plus 6. Well, now there aren't any variables left. So this is really just an arithmetic problem. So I'm going to do what's inside the parentheses because I'm following the order of operations, right? Start with parentheses. So negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. Negative 3 plus 6 is positive 3. Then we look for exponents. I don't see any. Then we look for multiplication or division. We do have that. We're being asked to multiply. So we do negative 7 times positive 3, which is negative 21. We just found our answer. All right, let's look at the problem on the right. We have g of x equals negative 15x plus 7, and we're asked to evaluate for g of 0. So you're being asked to substitute 0 for x and then simplify. Push pause, try the problem, and then push play again when you're ready to check. Take a moment to compare your work to mine. Push pause if you need to because I'm about to go on to the next problem. Push play when you're ready to go with me. All right, I'm going to get you started on the last problem and then you're going to finish it up as part of your homework. We have h of x equals x cubed plus x squared plus x, and we're asked to evaluate for negative 3. So that means that each of the x's should be replaced by a negative 3. And notice I'm putting that negative 3 in parentheses each time. That's my hint to you for how to get started. Please complete this problem as part of your homework and then submit your work in the Google Classroom.